Hello, everyone. I'm glad you're here. Please like and subscribe so I can tell more interesting stories. Now, let's get started. So there I was, standing inside a cave. Not just any cave, mind you, this one was old. And I mean old, about 40,000 years old. Yeah, older than your mom's favorite lasagna recipe. No offense, Mom. The air smelled like damp stone and something ancient. You know that scent of wet rock mixed with dust and mystery. Multiply that by 10,000 generations. My footsteps echoed against the walls as I walked deeper inside, and then I saw them handprints. Red ochre handprints plastered against the wall. Some large, some small, like some prehistoric family just left their mark. A whisper through time. And right next to the handprints were animals, bison mammoths, rhinos, painted with stunning precision. Honestly better than anything I could doodle with a full set of markers and 3 YouTube tutorials. But here's what got me. These weren't just decorations. No. The way the paintings were placed deep in parts of the cave no one casually stumbles into it screamed purpose. Meaning, maybe worship. Historians still debate whether this was art for art's sake, a survival guide, or the first steps towards something bigger, something spiritual. Personally, standing there, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just art. This was a conversation with something unseen. Think about it. Why trek deep into a freezing, pitch-black cave to smear paint on a wall? No TikTok likes back then. No followers, just the desperate hope that someone or something was watching. And here's an odd fact for you. Some researchers believe those handprints might not even be handprints. They think they were blown onto the wall using hollow bones as airbrushes. Yep, the world's first graffiti artists. Move over Banksy. But jokes aside, the idea that people tens of thousands of years ago gathered here in the flickering glow of firelight to create this, it felt like walking into the birth of human consciousness. The moment when we started asking the big questions. Who am I? Why am I here? And what happens when I die? I crouched near one wall, running my fingers not touching, obviously just hovering over those faded lines. They felt familiar, like fingerprints left on the universe. I swear the silence in that cave wasn't really silence. It buzzed, like the echoes of prayers or maybe fears. You see, back then, life wasn't just hard, it was brutal. Every day was a gamble. Will we eat? Will something eat us? Will the river flood? Will the sun come back tomorrow? When you live that close to chaos, it's no wonder your mind starts looking for patterns, for meaning, for something bigger. And maybe that's where it started. Right here, in caves like this one, where shadows on the wall looked just a little too much like spirits, where the wind moaning through the tunnels sounded just a little too much like a voice. It's wild to think about. I mean, back then, there were no temples, no holy books, no commandments, just firelight fear and imagination. I imagine a small tribe huddled together. The shaman, or maybe just the loudest guy in the group, points to the bison painting and says, "We honor the bison. We draw the bison. Maybe tomorrow." The bison comes. And just like that, belief begins. And it wasn't just here. Around the world, from the caves of France to Indonesia, archaeologists keep finding the same thing. Evidence that humans separated by continents and oceans were all thinking the same wild thought. Maybe there's something out there, watching. One of my favorite weird facts. In El Castillo, cave in Spain, there's a red disc that's at least 800 years old, older than the oldest known Homo sapiens in Europe. Some argue it wasn't even us who made it. Neanderthals, maybe. Imagine that the species we like to mock as brutes possibly kicking off the whole religion thing before we even showed up. Of course, historians still debate whether these cave paintings were religious rituals, early magic, or just prehistoric Pinterest boards. But standing there, feeling that goosebump chill, I know what I believe. As my torch flickered, I pictured it. A child presses their hand to the wall. Their parent blows pigment around it, leaving behind a silhouette, a symbol, maybe a prayer, maybe a promise, or maybe a desperate plea. Protect us, feed us, let us survive one more day. And isn't that the heart of religion? The aching need to believe that this terrifying, beautiful, brutal universe has someone or something listening. I took one last look at those handprints before turning back. Because as much as this cave whispered about life, it also whispered about death. And oh boy, we're about to go there next. I stepped out of the cave, but the feeling clung to me like morning fog. That eerie whisper of the past, of hands pressed against stone, of people asking the universe for something, anything. But as soon as we started asking about life, we had to face death. You see, the real birth of religion didn't start with the stars or the rain or the bison. It started with the one thing nobody could outrun: death. Picture this. Somewhere around 100,000 years ago, give or take a few thousand. Because time gets a little fuzzy when you go back that far, there's a group of early humans standing over the body of someone they loved. And here's the weird part. Instead of just walking away, they dig a hole, carefully, lovingly, and they place the body inside. Why? Because something inside them whispered, "This isn't the end." Archaeologists have found graves like this all over. One of the oldest is in a cave in Israel called Kafse. Imagine it: a child, maybe around 12, buried with antlers laid over the head like a crown. A prehistoric halo, if you will. There's no practical reason for that. None. Unless they believed something about what happens next. And here's where it gets juicy. Historians still debate whether these early burials were acts of love, spiritual belief, or just people not wanting to smell grandma rotting in the sun. But come on, antlers, that feels like more than just sanitation. I stood over a replica of one of these graves. Once, don't worry, no real bones involved. And I swear, it hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't just a hole in the ground. It was a statement, a scream into the void. You mattered. You still matter. Can you imagine the first human to truly realize someone was gone, like really gone, not sleeping, not wandering, just gone? That's the moment right there, the birth of grief. And right behind grief comes the question we still haven't answered. Where did they go? And let me tell you, once that question pops into a brain, it never leaves. Not ever. Every religion, every myth, every ghost story starts with that one terrifying realization: people die. And we don't know where they go. Here's a weird little side fact for you. In some ancient graves, they found bodies covered in red ochre, bright red powder. Why? Well, some think it symbolized blood, life, a way of saying this person lives on. Or maybe it was an early version of, hey, let's make them look nice for the afterlife. Either way, imagine being the guy whose job it was to powder grandma's entire corpse. Yeah, somebody had to do it. But the deeper I think about it, the more I wonder, was this the first religious idea? The belief that death isn't the end, that there's something waiting, something watching. And it wasn't just about humans, by the way. Archaeologists even found Neanderthal graves where the dead were buried with flowers. Actual flowers, like a prehistoric funeral bouquet. Either that or Neanderthals were the world's first hopeless romantics. Of course not. Every ancient person got a cozy burial. Some were left exposed, some were burned, some even, brace yourself, got defleshed. Yep, scraped clean. Was it a ritual? Was it cannibalism? Was it both? Historians still argue about it over coffee and PowerPoint presentations. But whatever the method, one thing was clear. The dead weren't just gone. They were somewhere else, watching, listening, maybe judging. And that's where it starts, right? The fear that the dead could help you or curse you. Maybe that's why people started leaving offerings, a favorite tool, a necklace, or in one case, an entire turtle shell. Yes, you heard me. Somebody thought, you know what Grandpa needs in the afterlife? A turtle. The line between respect and superstition gets fuzzy fast. I crouched once near a dig site. Again, replica, no actual bones, and tried to picture it. A group gathered, hands trembling, hearts pounding as they said goodbye. Maybe someone mumbled the first ever eulogy. Maybe someone cried the first human tear for the dead. And maybe someone whispered, "Watch over us," or "Don't haunt me, please," or "We'll see you soon." From that moment on, the floodgates were open. If the dead go somewhere, where exactly? A cave, the sky, under the earth. Maybe everywhere, or maybe nowhere. Maybe they become the wind, the stars, the animals. Maybe they're just gone. But that uncertainty, that's the seed that grew into every religion we've ever known. And that seed, oh, it's about to sprout. Because once we noticed death, we started noticing the rest of the world too. The river that floods, the fire that burns, the moon that disappears and comes back like clockwork. It all started looking suspiciously personal. But before the gods arrived, before temples and sacrifices, something else happened first. We started giving names to things. So yeah, death opened the door. But what walked through that door? Oh, everything. Thunder, fire, rivers, wind, the moon, the sun, animals that wouldn't stop staring at you, like they knew something you didn't. I remember standing on the edge of a vast grassy plain. Imagine it untouched, wild. And I swear, the wind howled through the tall grass just right. And for a second, it sounded like a whisper. Like someone or something was trying to get my attention. That's exactly how it must have felt tens of thousands of years ago, when the line between the living and the world around them was, well, blurry. Really blurry. You see, before the gods came with their thrones and their lightning bolts and their strict rules about shellfish, there was animism. Fancy word, but super simple idea. Everything has a spirit. Everything. The rock, the tree, the river, even that one weird-looking squirrel. It wasn't just that the wind blew. The wind was someone, a presence, a force, a personality. Maybe playful, maybe angry, maybe hungry, who knows? Historians still debate whether animism was the first religion or just the default operating system of the human brain. But come on, imagine living in a world where every shadow, every rustle, every gust feels like it has intentions, like it's paying attention. I crouched beside a stream once, just listening. Water rushing over rocks, birds arguing in the trees, the breeze tugging at my hair, and I tried to imagine what it felt like to believe. This isn't just water. This is a living being, a spirit, maybe a friend, maybe a god in disguise. Here's a fun little fact that always makes me smile. Some of the oldest known human figurines aren't people at all. They're animals, carved with love care, and let's be honest, probably a little superstition. Some archaeologists even argue that the Venus figurines, those curvy, exaggerated statues, might not just represent fertility. They could represent the spirit of the earth itself. Mother Earth, literally. Of course, not everyone agrees. Some say they were prehistoric pinup dolls. Others say they were teaching tools or stress relief objects. Yep, even back then, nobody could agree on what art meant. Some things never change, but here's where it gets spicy. Once you start believing the river has a spirit, it's only a short hop skip and a shaman's drum away from realizing that spirit might need something from you. Maybe a gift, maybe respect, maybe a song. So imagine it. A tribe gathers by the river. The shaman stands up, probably wearing something fabulous made of feathers, bones, and questionable fashion choices. He chants, he dances, he tosses some herbs into the water. Maybe he says, "Oh, great river, flow gently. Feed our fish. Don't drown our children. Thanks in advance." And just like that, religion begins to take shape. Of course, not every spirit was friendly. Some were tricksters. Some were downright cranky. A sudden storm. Oh yeah, that's the sky spirit throwing a tantrum because someone didn't leave an offering. A failed hunt. Obviously the forest spirit's way of saying, "Try harder, buddy." But here's the funny part. Even as these early humans were terrified of the spirits, they were also deeply comforted by them. Because if the world has rules, even weird, invisible spirit rules, then you've got some control. Leave an offering. Sing the right song. Whisper the right prayer. And maybe, just maybe, the world won't crush you today. One of my favorite weird discoveries comes from Siberian shamans. Some of them believed that every object, even your drumstick, had its own tiny soul. Imagine having to apologize to your spoon if you accidentally dropped it. "Sorry, little guy. Didn't mean to offend." And here's the thing. Even today, traces of animism are still everywhere. Ever talk to your car? "Come on, baby. Start for me." Ever yell at your phone? "Don't die on me now." Yeah, congratulations. You're basically practicing modern animism. I once asked an anthropologist whether this way of thinking ever really went away, and he just smiled and said no. It evolved. It got dressed up in different clothes. And that hit me harder than I expected. Because once you believe everything has a spirit, well, then you have to figure out what those spirits want. What makes them happy? What makes them angry? What keeps them from, I don't know, flooding your village or sending bears into your tent? And that's when things started getting a little more organized. Soon, some spirits weren't just vague presences. They got names, personalities, favorite foods, specific powers. The wind wasn't just the wind. Now it was the Sky Father, or the Great Eagle, or that angry cloud guy who really needs therapy. I stood there, staring up at a mountain, and wondered how many thousands of people had once whispered to it, prayed to it, asked it for mercy. Because when you give something a name, it feels more real, more controllable, more powerful. And trust me, the moment spirits got names, oh buddy, the gods were not far behind. The fire crackled. Sparks jumped into the air like tiny shooting stars. And for a moment, standing there watching the flames dance, I could almost hear it, the deep rhythmic thump of drums, the clap of hands, the low hum of voices rising into the night sky. This was where it all came together. Imagine a group of hunter-gatherers circled around a fire. They're tired, hungry. Maybe someone just barely escaped being dinner for a saber-toothed cat. But tonight, there's meat on the fire. And as the smoke swirls up into the dark, something magical starts to happen. Someone starts to drum. Someone else starts to sing. And soon everyone's dancing. Not for fun, not just for fun anyway, but because this is how they speak to the spirits. Historians still debate whether dance and music were religious first or just entertainment that accidentally became holy. Honestly, looking at human history, it's probably both. But here's where things get hilarious and a little weird. Some researchers believe that some of these early rituals, they were chemically enhanced. That's right, psychedelics, magic mushrooms, fermented honey mead. Turns out the earliest religious experiences might have come with a side of hallucinations. And you know what? I get it. If you're going to try and talk to the spirit of the moon, you might as well bring some mushrooms to the party. I crouched near a fire pit, replica once charred bones, ash, and stone circles left untouched for thousands of years. And I could almost feel it. The rhythm, the pulse, the collective heartbeat of a tribe trying to reach something. The fire wasn't just warmth, it was a portal, a direct line to the spirit world. I imagine someone throwing herbs into the flames, maybe sage, maybe something stronger. The smoke twists into shapes, faces, animals, maybe even ancestors. The shaman sways, eyes roll back, hands trace symbols in the air, and the crowd believes. Because in that moment, with the flames dancing and the stars wheeling overhead, the line between the physical world and the spirit world vanishes. Here's a wild little fact that always makes me laugh. Some of the oldest instruments ever found flutes, made from bird bones, over 40,000 years old, which means somewhere out there, a caveman was absolutely vibing with a bone flute, probably playing the same four notes over and over, while everyone pretended not to be annoyed. And the thing is, it wasn't random. This wasn't just people getting weird for the sake of it. The music had meaning. The dances had meaning. Each step, each beat was part of a pattern, a ritual. Maybe to call the rain. Maybe to bring luck on the hunt. Maybe to thank the spirits for not killing them today. But here's where it gets even deeper. The group didn't just dance for the spirits. They danced for each other, to remember who they were, to feel connected, to survive. Because when you live in a world where tomorrow isn't guaranteed those shared moments around the fire, they become everything. Identity, memory, religion, all rolled into one smoky, sweaty, foot-stomping celebration of existence. I remember staring into that fire replica thinking, man, this is probably the most human thing we've ever done. Sit together, tell stories, sing, dance, try to make sense of a world that doesn't care whether we live or die. And somewhere in that chaos, somewhere between the drum beats and the howling wind, a realization sparks. Maybe, if we do this right, the spirits will listen. Or maybe the spirits are just us, our hopes, our fears, our desperate need to believe that we matter in this giant, indifferent universe. But whether it was real or not didn't matter. The belief was real. The feeling was real. The community was real. And that belief, it was about to evolve. Because while dancing around the fire was great, eventually someone had a bigger idea. What if, instead of waiting for the spirits to come to us, we build them a house? Yeah. The first temples, the first altars, the first permanent spaces designed purely for one purpose: to reach out, to connect, to beg, to thank, to worship. And let me tell you, when the gods arrived, they didn't just knock politely. They kicked the door down. I stood there, staring at the stones. Massive, perfectly carved, arranged in circles, stacked in pillars, some weighing more than a truck. And my brain just couldn't compute. How did a bunch of hunter-gatherers with no wheels, no metal, no cranes manage to build this? I was looking at Göbekli Tepe, the oldest known temple on Earth, built over 11,000 years ago before writing, before farming, before pretty much everything. And let me tell you, walking among those stones, you feel it. A presence. Like the air itself hums with something ancient, something sacred. See, this is the moment where humanity took a massive leap. For tens of thousands of years, spirits lived in the wind, the water, the fire. But here, at Göbekli Tepe, we dragged them down, gave them a home, made them neighbors. The pillars weren't just rocks. They were beings, carved with animals, foxes, snakes, vultures. Symbols that probably meant something very specific back then, but now just leave archaeologists arguing at conferences like, is that a fertility symbol or a warning sign no one knows? Historians still debate whether Göbekli Tepe was a temple, a community center, a giant prehistoric party venue, or all three. Honestly, looking at it, probably all three. Here's the kicker. People didn't live there. They traveled there, from miles, no hundreds of miles away, just to gather, to worship, to connect, to build something bigger than themselves. Imagine it. Tribes dragging these stones for weeks, rolling them on logs, dragging them over hills, working together, not for food, not for shelter, but for something invisible, something they believed was watching, was listening. And that's when the gods arrived. No longer vague spirits hiding in trees and rivers. Nope. Now they had names, personalities, and if you were lucky, maybe even a sense of humor. But probably not, because these early gods, oh, they were needy. Feed me, build me stuff, sacrifice things to me, or else. It's funny when you think about it. The second we made gods, we also made rules, sacrifices, offerings, rituals, because relationships even with the divine are apparently a lot of work. Here's a bizarre fact that always sticks with me. At Göbekli Tepe, there's no evidence of farming. None. But just a few centuries later, boom! Agriculture explodes nearby. Some historians argue that religion didn't come after farming. It came before. As in, we built temples first, then figured out how to feed everyone we dragged here. That's right. The gods might be the reason we invented farming. Not survival, not convenience, not laziness. Nope. Religion. I walked around those stones, running my hands over the cool surface. Don't worry, no touching allowed, but metaphorically speaking. And I tried to picture it. The chanting, the drums, the smell of fire, the sound of thousands of feet stomping on packed earth. All for the gods. But it wasn't just Göbekli Tepe. Around the world, temples start popping up. Stonehenge, the temples of Malta, the ancient ziggurats of Mesopotamia. Different places, different cultures. Same idea. The gods live here now. And once the gods had addresses, oh boy, things started getting complicated. Because it turns out the gods weren't cheap dates. They wanted stuff. Food, trinkets, blood. Yep, blood. Animals at first, sometimes plants. But soon, humans started wondering, what if the gods want something bigger? And that's where things get real dark, real fast. Because if building a temple got you rain, maybe sacrificing a goat got you a herd. And if that worked, well, what about something even more precious? Yeah, you know where this is headed. I took a deep breath. This part gets a little uncomfortable. Because once the gods had names, once they had homes, once humans figured out how to bargain with the divine, Well, somebody somewhere had a terrible idea. What if the gods don't just want gifts? What if they want sacrifices? It probably started small. A bit of grain, a piece of meat, maybe the choicest fruit. Something simple. Thank you, dear gods. Please don't send a flood this year. But here's the thing about deals with the divine, they escalate fast. Imagine a farmer in Mesopotamia. The rains didn't come. His crops are dying. His family's starving. He's tried everything. Prayers, songs, little offerings. Nothing works. Then someone, probably the local priest, leans in and whispers, "Well, have you tried giving them something more?" Yeah. Cue the goats, the sheep, the cows. The blood hits the dirt, the smoke rises, and if the rain comes afterward, oh boy, confirmation bias kicks in. It worked. The gods are pleased, but what if it doesn't? What if the crops still fail? Then the logic turns dark, real quick. The gods must be angrier than we thought. And that's when humans start looking at each other. It's horrifying to think about, but as brutal as it sounds, it made a twisted kind of sense back then. The more valuable the sacrifice, the better the favor from the gods. And what's more valuable than a life? It wasn't everywhere, of course, and historians still debate whether human sacrifice was common or just something a few particularly unhinged civilizations came up with. But the evidence? Oh, it's there. In the ruins of Carthage, archaeologists found tiny urns filled with the charred remains of infants. Yeah, that's real. Whether it was routine or rare is still argued, but those little urns are not imaginary. In ancient China, massive graves filled with human sacrifices were found next to royal tombs. Servants, guards, musicians. Yep, even in the afterlife, somebody had to play the lute. And of course, the Maya and the Aztecs. Everyone loves to talk about them. The top of the pyramid, the chanting crowds, the knife raised high, the heart still beating as it's held up to the sun. It sounds like a horror movie, but for them, it was the ultimate offering to keep the universe running. I remember standing at the base of one of those Mesoamerican pyramids, staring up thinking, how many people climbed those steps knowing they weren't coming back down? Here's a bizarre little side fact that always makes my eyebrows twitch. The Inca Empire. They practiced child sacrifice. But, and this is where it gets darkly fascinating, they chose the most beautiful, healthiest children, treated them like royalty, fed them the best food, clothed them in fine garments, gave them the most loving, luxurious send-off, before leading them to the top of a freezing mountain and leaving them there. It was seen as an honor, a privilege. Imagine that. Your entire family proud that you were chosen to die. But here's the uncomfortable question that still lingers. Why? Why did this happen? Well, it goes back to control. When life feels chaotic, when storms come, when droughts last too long, when enemies attack, you start looking for patterns, for cause and effect. Maybe, if I give up something precious, the gods will protect me. It's tragic, it's brutal, but it's also deeply human. Historians still argue whether it was more about fear or love. Did people sacrifice to appease cruel, angry gods? Or was it an act of devotion? A way to give the best of themselves to the forces that kept them alive? Probably both. Honestly, definitely both. And this isn't just ancient history. Look around today. No, we don't toss people into volcanoes anymore. But people still make sacrifices to things they believe are bigger than themselves. Time, money, comfort, careers, health, sometimes even relationships. All for some idea, success, fame. God, destiny, the universe, whatever you want to call it. Because once humans believe something has the power to change their fate, they'll do almost anything to keep it happy. But here's the thing. While sacrifice was one way to talk to the gods, there was another, a sneakier way, a way that involved, well, middlemen. Because if the gods are that powerful, someone's got to know how to talk to them, right? Enter the priests. And oh boy, things are about to get political. I swear, this is the part of history where things go from spiritual to suspiciously organized. Because once the gods were living in temples and demanding sacrifices, well, somebody had to manage all that divine paperwork. Enter the priests, the shamans, the oracles, the spiritual middlemen, the people who claimed, hey, you know what, I can talk to the gods, so you don't have to. Yeah, convenient, right? Imagine a farmer rolling up to the temple with a goat. The priest steps forward, all decked out in feathers, beads, fancy robes, or, let's be honest, sometimes just suspiciously clean loincloths, and says, ah, yes, the gods will accept this goat. But also, the gods would really appreciate a little extra grain, maybe some silver. Oh, and by the way, they're kind of upset about your fence line encroaching on temple land. And just like that, religion starts looking an awful lot like a business. Historians still debate whether priesthoods were purely spiritual leaders or the world's first politicians in cosplay. Honestly, it's probably both. I stood once in the ruins of an ancient Mesopotamian ziggurat. The temple loomed above, even in ruin, and I could almost hear it, the echo of deals being made. Offer this, pay that, obey these rules. It wasn't just a house for the gods. It was the beating heart of the entire city. See, this is where the lines between religion law and government started to blur. The priests didn't just tell you how to pray. Oh no, they told you how to live, what crops to plant, when to marry, how much to pay in taxes, and who was going to war or not. Because if the gods were the ultimate authority, then the people who spoke for the gods, yeah, they were basically untouchable. Here's a weird little fact that always makes me chuckle. In ancient Egypt, priests were required to shave every part of their body every day. Why? Because hair was considered impure. Imagine a bunch of priests walking around shiny as bowling balls, all to stay spiritually hygienic. But underneath all the rituals, the incense, the chanting, was power. Cold, hard power. Temples weren't just spiritual centers. They were banks, warehouses, courthouses, and yes, sometimes, even hospitals. People stored grain there, paid debts there, got judged there. In some cases, the temple owned more land than anyone else, more livestock, more wealth. Imagine that. You're a struggling farmer praying for rain while the temple next door has a warehouse filled to the ceiling with grain offerings. Don't worry, the priest says the gods are pleased, mostly. And the thing is, this wasn't always bad. Priests organized festivals, took care of the poor sometimes, kept records, maintained order. In many ways, religion was the glue that held society together. But yeah, there were definitely times when it got sketchy. Because if you control the divine hotline, you pretty much control everything. Oh, and don't forget the oracles, the seers, the dream interpreters, people who claimed they could hear the gods whispering, usually after inhaling a suspicious amount of smoke or chewing some mysterious herbs. Ever heard of the Oracle of Delphi? Yeah. People from all over ancient Greece would hike for days, weeks, even just to hear a woman sitting on a tripod mumbling riddles while high on volcanic gases. Great news, traveler. You shall conquer, or maybe you shall die trying. Hard to say. Good luck. And people believed it. They built cities based on it, started wars because of it. Because when life is unpredictable, when floods come, when famine strikes, when enemies invade, you'll do anything to feel like anyone has the answers. But here's the thing. The priests didn't just offer answers. They started offering something even more valuable. A promise. Follow the rules. Obey the gods. And when this messy, miserable life ends, something better is waiting. That's right. This is the part of history where religion stops being just about survival. It becomes about salvation, the afterlife, heaven, hell, karma, judgment. The idea that death isn't just an end, but a beginning. And let me tell you, once that idea entered the chat, oh, humanity was never the same again. I sat there once staring at the sunset melting into the horizon, and I couldn't help but think, this is exactly where the next chapter of belief begins. Because for the first time in history, humanity wasn't just worried about crops, floods, or angry sky gods. Nope. Now we were worried about something way bigger. Something terrifyingly permanent, the afterlife. See, somewhere along the way, religion stopped being just a negotiation for rain or protection. It started offering answers to the ultimate question that's haunted every human since the first time someone realized, oh, I'm gonna die one day. And here's where it gets really spicy. Religions didn't just start promising a life after death, they started deciding who deserved it. I stood once in front of the ruins of an Egyptian tomb staring at the carvings. Scenes of the soul's journey, boats sailing through the underworld, jackal-headed gods weighing hearts against feathers. And I thought, man, talk about performance anxiety. If your heart was lighter than the feather of Maat, goddess of truth, you got a free pass to paradise. If not, yeah, say hello to Amit, a delightful little monster who's basically part lion, part hippo, part crocodile, and 100% ready to eat your soul like a cosmic snack. And it wasn't just Egypt. Around the same time in Mesopotamia, they had their own version of the afterlife. Spoiler, it was depressing. A dark, dusty, miserable underworld where souls shuffled around forever like extras in a bad zombie movie. No rewards, no punishments, just eternal boredom. Historians still debate why some ancient cultures imagined joyful afterlives while others, well, didn't bother. Some say it depended on how harsh their daily lives were. Others think it was tied to social structures like, hey, if you were rich and powerful, obviously you deserve a nice afterlife. The peasants, not so much. But here's where things took a turn. Somewhere between temple sacrifices and the cosmic balance sheet, humans came up with a radical idea. What if the gods don't just care about our offerings? What if they care about how we treat each other? Boom, enter morality. Suddenly, it wasn't enough to just bribe the gods with a fattened calf or a few jugs of wine. Now you had to live right. Be honest, be kind, follow the rules. Or else, the afterlife might not be so friendly. Zoroastrianism, for example, one of the oldest monotheistic religions, introduced this wild concept of cosmic dualism. Good versus evil, light versus darkness. And you were right in the middle, making choices that tipped the scales. Then came the Vedic traditions in India. Karma enters the chat. Hey buddy, everything you do, it matters, not just now, but forever. Your next life depends on it. So maybe think twice before stealing your neighbor's goat. I remember standing by the steps of an ancient Hindu temple, once watching the pilgrims bathe in the river, their hands folded in prayer. And I realized this wasn't just about gods anymore. It was about accountability, about trying desperately to make sense of a world that often seemed unfair. Because if the wicked suffer in the next life and the virtuous are rewarded, then maybe Maybe the universe isn't random. Maybe it has a plan. Of course, the definitions of wicked and virtuous, oh boy, those got written by people. And as you can probably guess, the people writing the rules were usually the ones with the biggest temples, the fanciest hats, and the most goats. Here's a weird little fact that always makes me laugh nervously. Some ancient religions had entire catalogs of sins that are oddly specific. In one Mesopotamian tablet, there's an actual curse for stealing someone's donkey and falsely accusing them of stealing yours first. Yeah, even back then, petty drama was eternal. But underneath all the rules, the rituals, the cosmic scorecards, was a promise. Be good, follow the rules, and when this life ends, something better is waiting. It's beautiful. It's comforting. It's also terrifying. Because now it wasn't just about surviving this life. It was about living with one eye on the next. And for the first time, your God wasn't just your God anymore. Nope. People started looking at their neighbors and thinking, wait, why do you worship a different God? Why do your rules look different? Who told you that was the right way to live? Yeah, you can probably guess where this is headed, because when the afterlife is on the line, disagreements get real messy real fast. It always starts the same way. A simple glance, a neighbor doing something wrong, burning incense to the wrong God, praying in the wrong direction, eating the wrong food on the wrong day. And suddenly, the quiet thought creeps in. Wait, are they damning us all with that nonsense? Yeah. This is the part of history where religion went from being, let's survive together, to, my God is better than your God. See back when spirits lived in rivers and trees, nobody really fought over it. Your mountain spirit did mountain stuff. My river spirit did river stuff. Everybody got along. But once gods became bigger, more powerful, more jealous, oh man, things changed. I stood once in the ruins of Jerusalem, running my fingers over the crumbling stones, thinking, this ground has seen more holy wars than probably anywhere else on earth. And it all started with a single dangerous idea. There is one true God, and you're doing it wrong. The birth of monotheism was a seismic shift. It wasn't just our tribe has a God. It became our God is the only God. Yours fake, false, dangerous. Historians still debate whether monotheism was born out of genuine spiritual revelation or good old-fashioned power consolidation. Honestly, probably both. When everyone agrees on one God, it's a lot easier to run an empire. Take the ancient Hebrews, a small, often oppressed group clinging to the radical belief in a single, all-powerful, invisible God. No statues, no idols, just commandments, just laws, just the word. Revolutionary. Absolutely. Also, wildly unpopular with neighboring cultures who were like, what do you mean our gods are fake? That's rude. And from there, oh yeah, the floodgates opened. Christianity, Islam, religions that didn't just believe in their own God, but believed that everyone else had to believe in that God too, or else. Suddenly, religion wasn't just personal. It wasn't just about survival or community. It became an identity, a badge, a line in the sand. And when identity gets threatened, well, people fight. Crusades, jihads, witch hunts, heresy trials, forced conversions, holy inquisitions, all in the name of the divine. I once stood at the edge of an old battlefield in France grass, now growing, where thousands once died under banners marked with crosses and crescents. And I thought, how did something that started with dancing around a fire end here? Here's a grim little fact for you. The The 30 Years' War fought in Europe during the 1600s started as a religious conflict between Catholics and Protestants. By the time it ended, over 8 million people were dead, and half the time, nobody even remembered what they were fighting about anymore. Religion, politics, power. It all became this tangled, bloody knot. But here's the complicated truth. Religion didn't just tear people apart. It also held them together. While some were waging holy wars, others were building hospitals, schools, feeding the poor, sheltering the sick, inspiring art, music, architecture that still takes your breath away centuries later. The same force that whispered convert or die in one ear also whispered love thy neighbor in the other. Because humans, well, we're complicated like that. And the irony, the very same religions that once fought to the death over who had the right God eventually started sitting down together, talking, debating, even gasp cooperating. Historians still debate whether this shift was genuine spiritual growth or just people getting tired of war. Probably both. Standing in a modern city, watching a mosque, a church and a synagogue share the same street, I can't help but think, man, if someone from 3,000 years ago saw this, their brain would absolutely explode. But even now, the tension lingers. The whisper of my truth, or yours. It's quieter than before, but it's still there, still humming beneath the surface. Because when something promises not just answers to life, but answers to what happens after life, well, people hold on tight, sometimes too tight. And yet, for all the conflict, for all the division, something else has been happening too. Something kind of beautiful. Religion started evolving. It started asking new questions, harder questions, not just who's right, but are we even asking the right questions? And that is where we are now, standing at the edge of something new, wondering, what's next? I sat quietly on a park bench, watching people pass by, some in suits, some in robes, some in jeans, some with crosses around their necks, some with prayer beads wrapped around their hands, and some with nothing at all. And it hit me. This is it. This is where the long, strange story of belief has brought us. Because for all the wars, the temples, the sacrifices, the whispered prayers into the void, here we are. Still asking, still searching. Religion didn't die. It didn't fade. It evolved. Once upon a time, it was about spirits in rivers, then gods in the sky, then priests in temples, then commandments carved in stone. And now it's podcasts, meditation apps, live stream sermons, tarot TikToks, and people asking the universe for signs while sipping overpriced coffee. Historians still debate whether modern religion is a continuation of ancient belief or something entirely new. A remix of the spiritual with the scientific, the mystical with the modern. But one thing's for sure, we're still looking for something. Some of us find it in churches, mosques, synagogues, temples. Some of us find it in the forest on a yoga mat in a therapist's office, or under a blanket binge-watching Netflix with a cat named Jupiter. And then there's this fascinating little twist. For the first time in history, humanity is openly asking itself, what if the gods are just us? What if religion is less about invisible beings and more about the very real human need for connection, for meaning, for a story that makes this chaotic, beautiful mess of existence feel like it matters? I walked through a city one evening, neon lights glowing, hearing the call to prayer echo from one street while a gospel choir practiced down the block. A Buddhist temple sat quietly around the corner, incense floating into the air, blending with the smell of pizza from the shop next door. It was weirdly perfect, sacred and mundane, holy and hilariously human. And you know what? Some things haven't changed at all. People still light candles for hope, still whisper to the sky when nobody's looking, still argue loudly over whose truth is truer. But we also talk more, share more, question more. There are people who say I'm spiritual, but not religious. Others who say I don't believe in anything, but I still feel something bigger sometimes. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the birth of religion wasn't about gods at all. Maybe it was about us, about being tiny creatures, standing under an impossible sky, staring at the stars, feeling scared, feeling small, and needing to whisper into the darkness. I'm here. I exist. Does anybody hear me? And whether the answer comes from a god, a spirit, the universe, or just the smile of another person, the whisper still matters. Because here's the secret nobody likes to admit. We're still making gods every day. We make them out of ideas, out of hopes, out of fears, out of science, out of fame, out of money, out of love, out of each other. And whether that's terrifying or beautiful, well, maybe it's both. So yeah, the story of religion isn't over. Not even close. It's still unfolding. Right now. Right here. With every breath, every prayer, every question. And maybe that's exactly how it was always meant to be. So, here we are. At the end of this story, or maybe just the beginning. I want you to take a breath. Let it out slowly. Look around you. Wherever you are right now, on a walk, driving, sitting at home, it's easy to forget just how strange and wonderful it is to even exist. For over 100,000 years, humans have been whispering to the sky, to the trees, to something bigger, something beyond. Whether it's gods, spirits, ancestors, or just the quiet hum of the universe, we've danced around fires, painted on cave walls, built temples that touched the clouds, fought wars, cried out in grief, laughed in joy. And all along, we've been trying to answer the same questions. Why are we here? What does it mean? What happens next? And maybe, just maybe, the answer was never out there. Maybe it was always right here, in the connections we make, in the stories we tell, in the small, quiet moments when we realize we're not alone. So, wherever your path takes you, whether it's toward faith, away from it, or something beautifully in between, I hope you remember. You are part of the oldest story in the world, the story of being human. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone you care about. I'll see you in the next story.